My name's Tim, and I'm a recently turned 40-year-old man. I was with my ex, Jessica, for 8 years, and we were married for 7 of them. She had already been divorced once before we tied the knot, but this was my first time heading down that road. To put it simply, I found myself emotionally withdrawing from her, though not deliberately. Jessica manipulated me into believing that I was a complete failure, and she convinced me that something was seriously wrong with me when we separated. I have a solid job and earn more money than she does, and we even went through testing with a counselor a few years back that proved I had a balanced personality and stable emotions. But recent counseling made me realize the truth. It wasn't me who was the problem. Jessica was simply not trustworthy, and without that trust, how could we have any emotional intimacy? No wonder I withdrew emotionally. It was my own defense mechanism. And sure, emotional neglect can be devastating for a woman, but Jessica always acted like she was completely innocent. She never showed any introspection about how her behavior might have contributed to this mess. Eventually, she took me to task on it, which led to her asking for a separation and finally saying she wanted a divorce. In the 2 months leading up to the blow-up, I knew something was going on with her, but she wouldn't admit it, so I just kept my head down and went on with my life. After we separated, I found out that she'd been having an affair, at least an emotional one, with a married guy. I called her out on it in early January of 2021 and caught her completely flat-footed. She tried to lie her way out of it at first, but I laid out my evidence, and she finally confessed. Even then, she tried to excuse herself by saying, "Well, nothing physical happened, so it wasn't really cheating." What a coward. That sealed the deal for me. My gut feeling about Jessica was confirmed, and I knew she couldn't be trusted. In the past, she'd broken my trust in many small ways. Any married person knows those little things eventually pile up. I'd tell her something in confidence, or we'd discuss matters that were supposed to stay private between us, and she'd go and blab them to others. This wasn't just a mistake she made once or twice, it was a pattern. As for me, I was drinking too much and smoking pot, but I always kept my job and made sure we were financially stable. I was good at my job, and we never fought about money, but my drinking made me tough to be around. I stopped drinking and smoking pot in December and have been sober ever since. Hallelujah for that. Looking back 2 or 3 years ago, Jessica's sister Mary was having an affair behind her husband's back, a poor doormat of a guy who let people walk all over him. I always had the feeling that her family tried to mold me into a compliant little house pet, like that poor sap, but I never let them. Her sister told Jessica about her affair in confidence, as if it weren't a big deal. But Jessica was absolutely furious. She was livid that night and turned to me, asking what she should do. We talked for probably 2 hours about infidelity and the different types. I remember telling her that emotional affairs were just as much adultery as physical ones, and that any form of cheating was grounds for divorce. Once trust is broken, it can never really be repaired. I made it crystal clear that I could never trust a woman who betrayed me in that way, and I meant every word. If she didn't know my stance before, she sure knew it after that conversation. Fast forward to fall 2020. Jessica started feeling neglected, and this married guy gave her the validation she craved. But here's what I realized in hindsight. Jessica was always terrible at keeping secrets, and even worse at lying. She'd act all high and mighty, claiming that even small white lies were wrong. But I'm starting to think she only did that because she was awful at lying. If something was bothering Jessica, I could always tell. Conversations with her would go like this. "Hey, what's wrong, Jessica?" "Nothing." "Come on, I can tell. Are you going to make this like pulling teeth, or are you just going to tell me now? You know I'll eventually figure it out." I was never wrong when I sensed something was up. Not once. At some point, Jessica crossed the line into emotional affair territory, or maybe even a physical one. She knew she couldn't keep it hidden from me forever, because I'd sniff it out eventually. Even if she wanted to come clean and fix our marriage, she'd remember that conversation we'd had years ago. She knew my stance on cheating was rock solid, so she only had a few choices. Come clean and hope I could handle the truth and work through it with her rather than leave her. But she knew that was unlikely since I'd made my position clear. Confess and face divorce, but her reputation would still be tarnished. Hide it and either keep the affair going while staying married, or break it off but keep lying. This would be tricky since she couldn't keep secrets or lie without slipping up. Beat me to the punch by filing for separation and making it look like she was the victim while gaslighting me. Make me carry the blame for our marriage failing, all while walking away as the victim and keeping her facade intact. So Jessica chose option number 4, but she didn't realize that I'm no fool. I was a little late in catching on, mainly because I was in denial, but when I asked her directly in December if she cheated, her face said it all. I didn't dig into it further until January because I was busy moving out and figuring out the next step. Her attempt to twist things was downright despicable, and in many ways, worse than the infidelity itself. They say the cover-up is often worse than the crime, and boy, they weren't wrong. Adjustment and healing. From December until the end of February, I stayed with my parents, who lived about an hour away. My birthday is in December, and then there's Christmas. Needless to say, this was the worst birthday and Christmas of my life. I turned 40, which is supposed to be a big celebration. A lot of people have a tough time embracing the big 40. And for me, it was even harder because of everything that was going on. I couldn't eat much of anything during most of December. Toward the end of the month, my appetite slowly started coming back. But when I discovered the affair, I lost it all over again. I managed to supplement my diet with high-protein shakes and hit the gym every morning before work. I pushed through that struggle, though it was not easy. Thankfully, I work from home, so I didn't have to worry about driving to the office. December tends to be a slow month for my job, which was perfect since my concentration was shot. When things picked up again in January, it was tough to focus, but I got slightly better over time. Still, it was the worst thing anyone had ever done to me, and the worst thing I'd ever been through. I've been seeing a counselor since early December and continued up to the end of May. I went through 3 different counselors. I can't stress this enough. People, go to counseling. Seriously, it will help you. If the first person you see doesn't help, move on to someone else. But whatever you do, talk to someone to keep a basic level of mental health. In my case, the first counselor was helpful until he wasn't. Once I realized there was nothing more to gain from him, I moved on. Each of them offered something unique to my processing and healing. Despite the affair, I decided I'd do everything in my power to save the marriage. I suppose I'm just loyal and value commitment. It didn't work out in the end, but at least I can say that I did everything I could. I didn't date until after the divorce was finalized. For me, stooping to Jessica's level was out of the question. I wasn't going to return infidelity with infidelity. I wore my ring until the very last day, as painful as it was. For those who are atheist or agnostic, I'm not looking to debate philosophy or theology. Just know that you're entitled to your beliefs, and so am I. The thing that helped me the most was God, without a doubt. I didn't have the mental strength to push through this storm on my own, but somehow He provided, even though at times it didn't feel like it. A few years back, I bought a short book called 3 Easy Steps to Emotional Healing. I can't remember why I bought it, but I had never read it before. One night in late January or early February, I remembered that I'd packed it with a few things I hadn't put into storage. I broke it out and read it all in one sitting. I asked my parents to help me follow the steps outlined in the book. It was incredibly painful to go through those steps, but I can't articulate the healing I received. It felt like a miracle. Just like the pain of having a bullet dug out of your body, it did hurt, and there were many, many bullets. But we dug them out one by one, and the Lord took each one and healed the wounds. I probably received as much healing in an hour and a half as most people would get in a year or more. It might have been the single best thing I did for myself, and one of the greatest things God has done for me in my life. In late February, I decided to move back to my original city. I wondered if I even wanted to live there anymore. Again, I can theoretically live anywhere I want with an internet connection because I work remotely. But wherever I lived, I was scared of living alone and feared losing the emotional support I'd had for the previous few months. I feared what it would be like living in a place where I'd spent my married life. Would I break down in tears every time I passed a place that triggered a memory? There were so many places and so many memories, but I decided that I wouldn't let Jessica or this whole mess rob me of a place I loved. It would only be haunted if I let it be. I knew it might be tough, but the only way to deal with it was to face it head on. If I wasn't going to face it, it would always be haunted. Divorce care. On the advice of others, I signed up for a faith-based divorce support group called Divorce Care. The lady who ran it was nice enough, but she sure liked to talk. On the first and only night I attended, there were 5 people total: the leader and her husband, myself, a woman with kids going through a divorce, and a man with kids also going through a divorce. I forgot to mention that I have no kids, thank God, because that would have made this whole situation even worse. I'm not going to bash the program, because many people said it helped them tremendously, and I'm glad it did. But it wasn't for me, and here's why. I walked out feeling worse than when I walked in. Right from the start, they told us that the next 6 months to a year of our lives would be sheer hell. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. Personally, I don't appreciate that kind of negativity being prophesied over my life. As the Bible says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. I had fought too hard for my mental health with God's help to let it all unravel because of some people I didn't even know who were supposed to be helping me. Yes, things were tough, and I knew I'd still be dealing with some things for a while. It's not that I was in denial, but I had a choice to make. I could either wallow in sadness and misery for the next 6 to 12 months or even longer, or I could choose to fight and move on. I'm not saying you can skip grieving and those negative emotions. You can't. You'll feel that pain, but you can choose whether or not it will take over your life. You can wallow in the mud puddle or move through it to reach the other side. I decided that I wasn't going to wallow in that nonsense or let anyone else make me. To be clear, that didn't mean I buried my feelings. I didn't. I let myself feel everything and cry when I needed to, and sometimes I still do. But I'm moving forward. Moving on and dating again. I'm not here to tell anyone when to start dating again. That's a personal choice. I do believe the right time is different for everyone. As I said earlier, I wouldn't date until the divorce was final, and I cited moral reasons for that. But even without my moral compass, I still wasn't ready to date before it was finalized because I was an emotional wreck. My self-confidence was destroyed. Being cheated on really does a number on the victim. It can crush the spirit. The one person you're supposed to trust most betrays you in the worst way possible. If there's one thing we all agree on in marriage, it's faithfulness. It's the one thing you don't break. But Jessica did. I had my chances to cheat and could have justified it to myself. But I never would have done that and never did. So yes, I can say I'm a better person than she is. Ultimately, she did me a favor by freeing me from a marriage with someone I couldn't trust. She stole 8 years of my life. Why should I let another 8, 10, 20, or 30 be stolen? The divorce was finalized in early March of 2021. I'd only been in my new place for a week or two. Even though we were legally done, there were still loose ends to tie up, like health insurance, taxes, and a shared bank account. I'd opened my own account earlier, but we still had one with both our names to handle mutual bills and taxes. Some folks told me I should wait 6 months to a year before dating again. Funny how most of those people had never gone through a divorce, much less one involving infidelity. It's like if they read enough blog posts, they think they know it all. Others said the sooner I get back on the horse, the better. I listened to both sides, but knew that advice is a case-by-case thing. It really depends on the person. There's no one-size-fits-all rule of thumb. In the end, I made my choice based on how I felt, not what others said. I didn't think it was fair to put myself in a penalty box when I wasn't the one who cheated. Why should I be punished to ease other people's concerns? I was honest enough to know if I really wasn't ready. I knew I wasn't ready in January and considered dating despite my own moral objections, so it's not like I'd lie to myself. I'm 40 years old and know what I want. I don't need to find myself. The woman I thought I had in my marriage was not the woman she turned out to be, so I set out to find the woman I wanted. I'm only getting older, and time is precious, so why wait if I felt ready? Within a week of the divorce being finalized, I signed up for 4 dating sites. Soon I was texting with multiple women and had my first date within 2 weeks, then another. The second date was with a wonderful woman, very attractive, with a great personality, and we really hit it off. At this point, I'm juggling conversations with 10 or 12 women. It took me about a week to get my confidence back, especially since I hadn't dated in 8 years. I went on a date with a third woman while juggling the other conversations over text and phone. That third woman and I are now exclusive and just celebrated our 2-month anniversary a couple of days ago. She's fantastic. When I first started dating, I assumed many women wouldn't want to go out with me so soon after the divorce. I figured that was a likely possibility, but I told myself, let's find out. Boy, did I ever. They had questions, as they should have, and I was honest about everything. I laid it all out, admitting where I'd gone wrong in the relationship. Sure, I'd made mistakes, but I'd learned from them. As it turned out, the fact that I'd been in counseling the whole time and was still going seemed to be a big draw for them. I can't count the number of times I heard, "It's so great that you're going to counseling. Most guys would never do that. And wow, you're really resilient. It says a lot about you and that you're doing so well. You're obviously a very strong person." I heard these comments both during in-person dates and over messages. It didn't hurt that my ex and I had already been separated for 3 to 4 months at that point. Yes, the divorce wasn't finalized until March, but we'd been apart long before that. I was able to say I'd been faithful to the end and hadn't tried dating until everything was final. This gave me credibility with the women I met, even though my ex had acted classless. I didn't use that as an excuse to stoop to her level. I kept it classy throughout, despite the awful betrayal I'd experienced. Of the 15 to 20 women I met, only one didn't want to date me because I was fresh out of a divorce. It wasn't personal. She'd been used as a rebound several times before, so she was understandably cautious. I have to say, those dates and interactions with the women I met were the best I'd ever had in my life. Maybe it's because I'd matured since my early 30s or something, but I was more confident on those dates. I'm still not sure why or how, considering what had happened, but I have a theory. The worst thing that could happen in a relationship had already happened to me, so what did I have to fear? I'd already lived through it, and I was still standing. I'm sitting at this restaurant, having dinner with this gorgeous woman who's practically undressing me with her eyes. So why shouldn't I be confident? To this day, it's still unbelievable to me that the supposed love of my life cheated on me. You'd expect me to be curled up in a fetal position, disgusted with myself and wanting to die. Not that I hadn't felt that way at some point before, but I was proving to myself that the adulterous, fire-breathing banshee from hell doesn't get to define who I am or what I'm worth. No one does, except for me and God. She only gets to influence my life to the degree that I let her, and I'm not letting her. No way. So if any of you are worried that no one will date you soon after a divorce, don't be so sure. But make sure you go to counseling, process your feelings, and do the work to heal. And it is work, no doubt about it. But it pays off. I'm not 100% healed, even now. Some things just take time. But expecting to be fully healed at this point would be ridiculous. I give credit to God, myself, and my support system of family and close friends. I leaned on God and put in the work to speed up my healing. I wasn't passive. I didn't just sit around waiting to feel better. I did things to make myself feel better. Taking power back. One of my best friends is an attorney. It wasn't something I used to appreciate, but attorneys are trained in much more than just the law. They learn about human behavior, psychology, and negotiation as well. My buddy had been through a nearly identical situation to mine. The only difference was that he and his partner weren't married. Still, everything else was the same. The relationship lasted 8 years. He withdrew emotionally, and then she began cheating. One day, he and I were out fishing on the lake like we often do, and we spent several hours talking about my situation. He brought up something interesting. Despite my ex-wife being the one to file for divorce, she would eventually reach out to me again, and not just for necessary reasons. I scoffed at this, thinking, she wanted a divorce and is clearly preoccupied with someone else. He also said I should stop talking to her directly. Instead, he suggested that I set up an intermediary. If she needed to communicate with me, she'd speak to the intermediary, who would relay her message to me and then pass my response back to her. He volunteered to be my intermediary, and the first step was letting her know about the new arrangement. I didn't want her to know my address, but there were still some items I needed mailed to me from when I moved out. Plus, I wanted a copy of our tax return once it was filed. We filed jointly for the year 2020, so she was told to mail all that stuff to my parents' address, and they'd pass it along to me. After that, she started making what appeared to be altruistic gestures. There are a few possible motives for why she did this, or maybe a mix of reasons. First, she wants to believe she could have me back, just for her ego. Second, she genuinely wants to test the waters because she's feeling the loss and wants to repair the relationship. Third, she's embarrassed that the breakup left her as the cheater, and wants to change how my family, friends, and our mutual connections see her. Fourth, my sudden refusal to communicate threw her for a loop, and not being able to email me whenever she wanted is messing with her head. Regardless of her motives, maintaining this boundary is healthier for me, and that's all I care about. It also strengthens my current relationship because my girlfriend knows I'm not talking to my ex anymore. Handling the communication. Before the divorce was finalized, I'd wanted to take our 2 male cats with me. We had 3 cats, 2 males and 1 female. The males were closer to me, while the female adored Jessica. She initially resisted my request to take the males, but I decided to let her have them, and detached myself emotionally from them when I moved out in December. Later on, my ex-wife emailed my lawyer friend out of the blue, offering me the 2 male cats, claiming she couldn't give them the attention they deserved because she wasn't home enough. But that logic was flawed. The 2 males are inseparable and play together all the time. If any of the cats weren't getting attention, it was the female, who pretty much despises the other 2 and only loves my ex-wife. I would have loved to take my 2 boys, but I considered the possible repercussions. First, my girlfriend is allergic to cats. Second, I didn't want to give my ex a reason to reach out to me in the future. Plus, I didn't want reminders of my past life roaming around my new one. My lawyer friend emailed her back saying I wasn't interested. A couple of weeks later, she emailed him with the login details so I could claim some frequent flyer miles I'd forgotten about and never asked for. A few weeks after that, she emailed me directly instead of going through him, saying she wanted to send me the taxes I had requested. She said that although I'd asked her to send everything to my parents' address, some other mail had come for me. If I just gave her my address, she'd mail it all directly to me. Just send it all to my parents like I asked. I didn't want her knowing where I live, showing up at my door, or leaving the cats there. My lawyer friend replied and reiterated that she should send anything meant for me to my parents' address. She also asked me to set up mail forwarding, but that request should have gone to my lawyer friend, not me. On social media, my ex and I haven't been connected since late November, though she was still connected to my family and friends long after the divorce. And despite everything, she kept photos of us together, including our wedding pictures, on her profile. Update 1. Suddenly, it doesn't sting so much anymore. This feeling started last week, and I was cautious at first. I felt this way before, but usually just for a day or 2. I kept thinking, let's see how long this lasts before I get too excited. But for almost a week now, the pain doesn't hit the same way. I still think Jessica sucks, but I care a lot less. Many of the same thoughts cross my mind, but I just feel like, meh. I don't think this has anything to do with my girlfriend either. I knew she was a better woman from the very first date, and she's only proven that since. We've been together for almost 4 months now. She's hotter, smarter, more emotionally mature, and a better lover. Even knowing this, the past used to sting, but now it hasn't for many days. I'm happy, and I hope someone out there finds solace in knowing that it's possible to feel better. Perhaps it's just a matter of time. Update 2. I was thinking about exposing my now ex-wife to her parents months ago. Many of you said to do it, and many of you said not to. I think I will. I haven't taken action against her yet, and some folks told me that telling her parents would be vengeful. To that, I say that if I truly wanted revenge, I'd do a lot more than just tell her parents. For me, my silence feels like I'm covering up her crime, not just against me, but against everyone who attended our wedding or even wished us well, including her parents. And she concocted a story about why we divorced, and of course, it was all my fault. Nope, forget that. Right now, it's been almost 7 months since the divorce was finalized, and I feel like waiting this long has given me enough time to communicate the truth without being purely vengeful. I got a new girlfriend 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, and I'm still with her. She's okay with me exposing Jessica to her parents, so no problem there. For anyone worried, I'm not attaching my feelings to anything I can't control, namely, how her family will react. I don't care what they think of the truth after I share it with them. I just want them to know what really happened. If anyone says they won't believe me, well, I recorded the phone conversation where I first confronted my ex-wife, and she admitted to the emotional affair. I could never prove a physical affair, but there's enough circumstantial evidence to suggest it. In any case, the infidelity was significant enough to end our marriage and that of the other guy. I'll include this phone recording when I send the message to her parents. And yes, The recording was legal. I might face blowback, but I'm not scared and don't care. They can't do anything worse to me than she already did. If anything, she should be worried that I might share the truth more widely. I have no plans to do that, but if any of them mess with me, they may wish they hadn't. I'll report back after doing it. I know some of you are curious whether or not you should expose your wayward spouse. I asked people in this community if they felt better or worse after outing their spouse, and the responses were mixed. I found that those who regretted exposing their spouse had expectations tied to the reactions of others. I won't make that mistake. I'll share what happens afterward. I'm not sure when I'm going to do it, but it will be soon. My attorney friend recommends sending a physical letter, so I'll probably take his advice. Update 3. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized. I never told her parents what she did, so she was able to smear my name and put all the blame on me. She has no clue that I recorded the phone call where she confessed to the emotional affair. She doesn't know that I have the call and text logs laid out neatly in a spreadsheet, with graphs detailing her betrayal. She doesn't know that I presented everything in an easy-to-understand format or that there's circumstantial evidence pointing to a physical affair. Her parents may or may not believe it, or they might lie to themselves, and that's fine. I can't control their response, but deep down, they'll know. Even if they deny it, they'll know. It's not about revenge, it's about making sure the truth is known. What they do with that truth is up to them. Actions have consequences, and one of them is that people know what you did. I'm not obligated to stay silent or cover this up. I feel like I've found the last bit of closure just by preparing everything to send and knowing that I'm going to do it soon. Unless God himself tells me otherwise, the mail is going out.